Hi everyone. Welcome once again to yet another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you for joining me once again. This is episode 121 of Hockey on the Spot, and it's now been a couple of hours, so I'm well rested and ready to do yet another video. As I said, I was going to do a second video today. This one is going to be a preview of every single series for round number 2. Now, I'll try to get this done and uploaded before the Boston-Montreal game tonight. Round 2 begins tonight. That's right. The most classic of all series, the Boston Bruins and the Montreal Canadiens. Game 1 in Boston tonight at NBC Sports Network, 7:30 p.m. sharp. The 34th time in the history of this game that these two teams are playing each other. Most of the time it's been Montreal that's come out on top in the history, but the last 2 times that these teams played each other in the playoffs, it would be the Boston Bruins coming out on top. In 2009, which was absolutely no contest, and 2011 en route to a Stanley Cup for Boston off of Nathan Horton's Game 7 overtime winner. Obviously, Nathan Horton no longer with the Boston Bruins. He is now a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets. But it's going to be very exciting. It's going to be probably the most exciting series of the first round. It's the one that everyone's anticipating, and for good reason. These are two teams that have a long history of nothing but hate, and more hate. But these teams, they've just been, since day one, rivals. And there have been a lot of legal, there's been a lot of legal scenarios that's gone down with this series. A lot of lawsuits that have gone down because of this rivalry. And so the history never leaves. The history is always there. Now, as far as the regular season goes this year, however, Montreal won the majority of the meetings with Boston this year. They met each other 4 times in the regular season this year. Montreal would win 3 of them. So that's obviously going to be nerve-wracking for Boston. And the way Montreal dismantled the Tampa Bay Lightning in the last round, you got to expect that the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins are going to be a little nervous going into this series. The Montreal Canadiens, despite the fact that they lack the size, this could be probably the most depth-heavy team they've had in years, and this could be a Cinderella-type Montreal team this year. They have the potential to go all the way. Thomas Plekanec is having a monster postseason so far. He had a monster first round. And, for Montreal, things just seem to be getting better and better for them. Now, they still are, they may have their share of injuries. Alex Galchenyuk, he's still out of the lineup. It's a huge hole to fill still. They may get Travis Moen back for this series. So, and for the Boston Bruins, they could get someone back too. Daniel Paille and players like Alex Galchenyuk and even Dennis Seidenberg have been skating, and Seidenberg thinks that there's a slim chance that he could return in these playoffs after being diagnosed to miss the remainder of the season. So that would definitely be something for sure. So yeah, this is going to be one heck of a series. Boston, obviously really a defensive style game, whereas Montreal plays more of a north-south, hard work type kind of game. And that's something that could dismantle the Bruins' one-dimensional style of play. They get their success through their defense. They get goals. They'll get you goals every now and again, and sometimes they'll even get 3 or 4 goals in a game. They've had a couple 30-goal scorers this year, but this is a defensive team under head coach Claude Julien. That's his style of play. And, for Claude Julien, what makes this also very significant, that Montreal is a team he formerly coached. So you can bet that Claude Julien is definitely looking forward to this one. And I'm sure Michel Therrien is also looking forward to this. Montreal, happy to be back in the second round. They think they have the tools to go far. The keys for this series, the key players for this series really are going to be the goaltenders. For Boston, without question, it's going to be Tuukka Rask and how well he plays. And for Montreal, it's going to be Carey Price and how well he plays as well. But also, their trade deadline acquisition, Thomas Vanek. Vanek's got to pick up his game, and he knows what's on the line. He knows the history of this rivalry, and he knows that his team has the potential to knock off the Bruins. They won the regular season series with them, and that definitely is something that the Bruins have taken into account. So we'll see. It's going to be fun. Going to be a very fun series to watch, and that is the series that will begin the second round of the playoffs tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC Sports Network. Okay. Next series we're going to talk about also in the East, the New York Rangers and the Pittsburgh Penguins. How about it? The New York Rangers, they get back into the second round for the third straight year, knocking off the Philadelphia Flyers in 7 games in what was a very tight series. Now for the New York Rangers, they'll go up against another Pennsylvania team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. And this Pennsylvania team will prove to be much more of a challenge than the Flyers. The Rangers know it, too. Whenever you go up against a team that has players like Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and James Neal and Chris Kunitz, Chris Letang when healthy, Matt Niskanen at his best, Paul Martin with the monster playoff he's having, and then Marc-Andre Fleury when he's on top of his game. When you play against a team like that, you know you're asking for trouble. And for the Pittsburgh Penguins, they had a kind of a close call in that 6-game series with the Columbus Blue Jackets, particularly in Game 4. He blew a 3-0 lead, lost in overtime. Marc-Andre Fleury did not play well. He looked like the Fleury we've seen in the playoffs for many years now. But this year with these two teams, it's a pretty even matchup, actually. Even though the Penguins, of course, are the Metropolitan Division winners, second in the East. It's pretty even in the sense that in the regular season series, everything was exactly even. Everything was exactly even. They both received the same amount of points in that season series and both won 2 games. Both teams won a game in regulation in decisive fashion for both teams, might I add. And both teams won a game in a shootout. So it's going to be a really interesting series for sure. But the New York Rangers know this. They know that they're going to have to go deeper than themselves and play much harder than they've ever played before if they want to beat a team like this. They have never, in their franchise history, beaten the Pittsburgh Penguins in the playoffs. The Rangers want to make this year, 2014, the year to finally beat the Penguins in the playoffs. In order for that to happen, Marty St. Louis is going to have to continue what he's been doing, to continue what he did in that first round against the Flyers. Rick Nash is going to have to completely step up his game. He does not have a goal yet in these playoffs. He has 5 assists, but not a goal yet. Nash has had opportunities. He had a great game last night against the Flyers, but he knows he's going to have to step up big time. He knows that the Penguins are no ordinary team, and they're never an easy team to beat, and they're never a team you want to go up against in the playoffs. And then, of course, Henrik Lundqvist, being the goaltender he is going to have to absolutely stand on his head. He is, by many standards, the greatest goaltender in the world right now. And he's going to have to show it in this series. The Penguins are not a team to take lightly. And then, of course, they'll also rely on their defense group. That's one of the strongest defense groups in the National Hockey League. Dan Girardi, Ryan McDonough, Mark Stahl, Kevin Klein, John Moore, Anton Strawman, all 6 of them are going to have to be good. And if one gets hurt, Rafael Diaz will step in, and he'll have to be good too. So, but Girardi, McDonough, and Stahl are the 3 signature defensemen on that team. They're all going to have to be good. And Brad Richards is a guy who I think is going to have to continue to play like the old Brad Richards we're used to seeing, the one that always becomes a completely different player in the playoffs and not the one we saw last year. Richards had a phenomenal first-round series against the Flyers. He had I believe he had more points in that one series than he had in every playoff game combined last year in the series against the Washington Capitals and the Boston Bruins. So Richards is going to have to really be good. You know, the Rangers themselves, they're just going to have to be strong. And the New York Rangers may get rewarded at some point in the series, as they may get one of their top rookie, Chris Kreider, back. And he definitely could return to the lineup in this round. And the Rangers are hoping it's going to be sooner rather than later because they need him. They need his offense. Now, obviously, it was a hand injury, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see how Kreider plays in his first couple games back. But he's going to have to be good. That's just it. Chris Kreider's going to have to come in and be good if he comes in at all. So we'll see. The Penguins had rest. They knocked off the Columbus Blue Jackets in 6 games. And with the exception of maybe their goaltending, they really don't have many weaknesses. And if you want to beat the Penguins, you got to shut down their top stars. Crosby, Malkin, Neal, Kunitz. You got to shut down all those guys. And you got to try to split the D. If you can get by their defense, you'll be in good shape. For the Pens, you know, they're a very successful team. They've been a very successful team for the past few years. A lot of people believe that this is a year where the Penguins could win the Cup, and everybody's right. The Penguins have a big Cup-heavy team this year. They are favorites for this series. So the Rangers, they're going to have to pull off some kind of miracle in order to beat the Penguins, and they're going to have to hope that Marc-Andre Fleury does not play on top of his game. But for the Penguins, obviously, for their game plan, they're just going to have to keep things simple. Not let the Rangers' defense get to them, because the Rangers, they are a defensive team that can beat any kind of offense. And the other thing that's going to have to be good for the Rangers exceptionally is the penalty kill, especially the penalty kill. Their penalty kill has been one of the best all season. It's going to have to be even better in this series. The Penguins have the top power play in the league. And the Rangers, when they get on a power play, they have to score. That's just pretty much it. That's going to be the game plan for the Rangers. This series will begin on Friday. That's tomorrow. Tomorrow on NBC Sports Network at 7 o'clock at the Game 1 at Consol Energy Center. Going to be a very fun time, very interesting series. And those are the series in the East. Now we will shift to the 2 series in the West, beginning with the other game that also begins Friday. The Minnesota Wild and the Chicago Blackhawks, the defending Stanley Cup champions, Game 1 at the United Center. The Chicago Blackhawks were down 2-0 in their first-round series against the St. Louis Blues. These are 2 teams who were both down in their first-round series 2-0, and they both came back to win. The Hawks, of course, beat the St. Louis Blues in 6 games, and the Wild beat the Colorado Avalanche in 7 games, and a thrilling overtime game in Game 7. So the Wild, they're motivated. And what's going to be even more of a motivation is that this is a rematch from last year. These 2 teams played each other in the first round last year, and the Hawks dispatched the Wild quite easily, actually. 5-game series. The Wild, you can bet on it that they're going to be looking for revenge. And the Wild have played so well against the Hawks all year, and the Hawks are nervous about that. They are nervous. even though they have more playoff experience, the Wild's north-south style of play absolutely burned the Hawks this season. The Hawks couldn't get anything going against the Wild this year except for that second game where the Hawks killed them 5-1. But the only other game they won was in a shootout. So the Wild got points in 4 of the 5 meetings between the two, and they won the season series in decisive fashion. So their north-south style of play, their ability to crash the net, that's going to hurt the Hawks. That could hurt the Hawks, and the Hawks know it. So, for the Chicago Blackhawks, they're primed for what they think will be a good series. That's not going to be an easy test for them. This is not the same Minnesota team we saw last year that just barely managed to get into the playoffs. They know the Wild are pretty much the real deal this year. The key players for this series, for the Hawks, you got to turn to your captain, Jonathan Toews. He's going to have to continue to be impressive like he was in the last round. And for the Minnesota Wild, you kind of got to turn to 2 players, actually, in Zach Parise and Jason Pominville. Those 2 are going to have to score a lot of goals. They're going to have to crash the net. Parise is going to have to crash the net and allow Pominville to get the shots. Jason Pominville, one of the deadliest wrist shots in the game, and it's very accurate, too. So that's something that could really be a big fear in going into this series for the goaltender, Corey Crawford. That's really going to be the weakness, though, for the Wild. Their goaltending situation is kind of a mess right now. They've had Josh Harding and Nicholas Backstrom out all year. Darcy Kemper started in most of the games, but he suffered an injury late in Game 7 against the Colorado Avalanche. Ilya Bryzgalov came in and picked up the win, but now can he come in and make a difference in the series, if Kemper can't come back? And if Kemper can't come back, who else do the Wild have? They don't really have a definitive starter yet, and it's really a rough situation for the Wild to be in. It looked like it was Josh Harding until he suffered from multiple sclerosis, which hopefully he returns from very soon, and, God praise him. But this is going to be a tough challenge for the Hawks. Again, not the same Minnesota team they went up against last year, but they're excited. This is going to be an exciting rematch, and Game 1 will be at the United Center, 9:30 p.m. start Eastern Time against on NBC Sports Network. So be sure to check it out. And then last but certainly not least, one of the interesting ones to talk about, the Wild and Hawks series begins tomorrow as well. And then we are on to our final series of the second round, one that doesn't start until Saturday, the very same day in which Montreal and Boston will play their second game. Game 1 of this series does not begin until Saturday. The first ever playoff series between the Los Angeles Kings and the Anaheim Ducks. Both teams have waited very long for this day to come. We've seen several occasions where the Sharks and Kings went up against each other, and one occasion where the Sharks and Ducks went up against each other. That was in 2009 when the Sharks won the President's Trophy. They got upset in 6 games by the 8th place Anaheim Ducks in the first round. This is the first time, however, where we've seen a Kings-Ducks series, and everyone's waited so long to see it. We've seen this rivalry go places where any rivalry has never gone before. They were the first 2 teams to play a regular season game in Europe. They played a 2-game series in London back in 2007. Both teams collecting a respective 4-1 win each. And then, of course, this season, they went on to play the first ever outdoor game in California at Dodger Stadium. The Ducks went on to win that game in rather decisive fashion, 3-0 as the road team. The Kings were considered the home team for that. So this rivalry has pretty much been everywhere but the playoffs. There's been blood, there's been battle, there's been snarl, there's been hate. And these two teams do not like each other. They hate each other. And every time they meet up, you're gonna expect that something nasty is gonna go down. These two teams just despise each other, and basically it's to the point where they wish that each other's team did not exist in the league. They have no respect for each other. But the Kings are the more experienced team, even though it's the Ducks with the home ice advantage. The Kings have more experience on their team. They do have the experience. They have the playoff experience. They have the players that can really get under the skin of the Ducks. However, it didn't happen this regular season. In the regular season this year, the Ducks got at least a point in every one of the 5 meetings between these two teams this year. The Kings went on to win the first meeting between these two at Honda Center in a shootout, but after that it was all Ducks. That included a shootout victory of their own in the final meeting of the year. And of course the Ducks also won the outdoor game. But they were, with the exception of the outdoor game, every one of those games was a 1-goal game. So even though the Ducks won that series, it's not like they were blowouts. Well, except for, of course, the outdoor game. It's not like they were blowouts. These games were tight. They were tight, and they were 1-goal games. So this is not going to be an easy series for anybody. And the Kings, they know what it's like to be in the playoffs a lot more than this Ducks team does. Even though the Ducks are probably the depth-heaviest team in the league, a lot of these players don't know what it's like to be in the playoffs. They got past the first round and beat the Dallas Stars in 6 games, but they haven't been this far in quite a long time. So the Kings are going to give the Ducks a really hard time, that's for sure. Not to mention the Kings also have a better goaltender in Jonathan Quick, a more experienced goaltender, where the Ducks are pretty much locked in a situation where they're switching between Frederik Andersen and Jonas Hiller. And, both of them trying to prove themselves in the playoffs. Again, what these two teams did in their last series, the Ducks, they defeated the Dallas Stars in 6 games. That Game 6 in Dallas, one of the premier memorable games of the playoffs, and will go down in Ducks history for sure. Down 4-2, scoring in the final, 2 minutes and 10 seconds to tie it, and then winning it in overtime, Nick Bonino. And as for the Kings, of course, they were making memories of their own, making history, actually, coming back from a 3-0 series deficit to defeat the San Jose Sharks in 7 games. Just a remarkable thing, something you never see every day, something that isn't seen every day, something that's rarely seen. And the Ducks know that, though. The Ducks are going to take that into account, and if by chance the Ducks end up taking a 3-0 series lead, which probably won't happen, they're not going to take the Kings lightly like the Sharks did when they get to Game 4. So, for the Ducks, they know this Kings team is not a joke, and they're not going to be taking them lightly. These two teams will not be taking each other lightly. The first game of that series will be Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC Sports Network at the Honda Center. So, for all 8 of these teams that have advanced to the second round, congratulations. I mentioned all of them and who they all beat except for Boston. I didn't really say who they beat in the first round. They beat the Detroit Red Wings in 5 games to get this far. Montreal, of course, swept Tampa Bay, the only sweep of the playoffs in that first round. But for the Ducks and Kings, no remorse will be made. They are both out on a mission to win that first ever playoff series with one another. They want to go into next season saying, hey, we beat you in the playoffs. You cannot mess with us. So, we'll see what happens. It's going to be a very interesting series, and it'll be a very interesting second round. We got quite a couple rivalries. again with the Kings and the Ducks, and of course Montreal, the Canadiens and the Bruins, the Rangers and the Penguins. They're not the biggest of rivals, but they are rivals in the sense that they're in the same division. They've been in the same division for years. And then Minnesota, Chicago, they're rivals in the sense that this is a rematch from last year's playoffs. So it's going to be interesting. The Wild, they want to be the team to knock off the defending Stanley Cup champions. And other than that, that's pretty much it. Actually, no, it's not. Before we cut this video out, my predictions for each series and how each series will end. I think for Montreal-Boston, I think that series is going to come down to the wire. But surprisingly enough, I'm going to say Montreal is going to win that series. I think the way they're built right now in the playoffs, the confidence that they've had, I think they're going to outmatch the Bruins with their speed and their ability to crash the net. Thomas Plekanec is going to have another unbelievable series. And I think Montreal will win in 6, maybe 7. I'm going to say 6, probably. I'll say Montreal in 6. For the Rangers and the Penguins, I'm one who believes that history can be on your side at times, and we all know the Rangers have never beaten the Penguins in the playoffs before. I do think the Penguins have a much better team than the Rangers. However, I think that in 7 games, this will finally be the year that the Rangers knock off the Penguins in the playoffs. I think it's going to be a 7-game series, and I think the Penguins are going to outplay the Rangers in most of the games. But I say that the Rangers will end up winning that series in 7 games. For Minnesota, Chicago, the Wild know how the Blackhawks play. They've played them all too much, and they know them all too well. However, I think the Wild still have a lot to learn. They haven't been to the conference finals in a long time, and Chicago has experience with this. So I'm going to say the Blackhawks win this series in 6 games. I say it's going to be a 6-game series. And then Ducks and Kings, this is the series I'm probably the most optimistic about. I think this series is going to be, in this series, both teams are going to battle, and I think it's going to really come down to the wire. I think it's going to go to 7 games, and I think I am going to put the Ducks, I'm going to say Ducks in this series. However, I'm going to be very optimistic about it. Same thing with the Rangers and Penguins. I'm saying that this will be the year that the Rangers will knock off the Penguins, but I'll be optimistic about that as well. Those are the 2 series I'm the most optimistic about. Probably this one a little bit more. I'll say Ducks in 7, but I'm not going to get my hopes up, and I'm not going to, go out and be like, oh, the Ducks are going to win the Stanley Cup. No way. I do not believe in picking your own team to win the Stanley Cup. I learned my lessons through sheer experience not to pick your own favorite team to win the cup. It just jinxes you, jinxes yourself, and your team. So, I'm gonna say, I will say Ducks in 7, but I'm very optimistic about it. This Kings team is just way too stacked with playoff experience to let this Ducks team go lightly. They didn't let the Sharks go lightly. What makes you think they're gonna let the Ducks go any lighter? And considering they hate the Ducks 10 times more. And now that is it for this video. That is it for episode 121 of Hockey on the Spot. The second round of the playoffs begins tonight with the Montreal Canadiens and Boston Bruins. That series will begin in exactly 20 minutes on NBC Sports Network, so be sure to check it out. It's going to be exciting, and we're going to be in for one heck of a second round. Okay, well now 19 minutes actually. But there you get my point. So we're in for one heck of a second round, and we're in for, it's going to be fun. And that will do it, folks. This has been episode 121, and this has been Hockey on the Spot. Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you guys for joining me. I'll see you guys again soon. I won't be doing another video until a team is eliminated from the playoffs, so we're going to have a little while to go before I do my next video. But when it happens, I'll see you guys then. Have a great day, and enjoy the playoffs. Peace.